I discovered my parents spent nearly $300,000 on each sibling while I got $8,000. When I confronted them, my golden child brother admitted he told them not to help me with student loans, so I cut contact and now they're begging me to come back. I'm Mike, 29M, and I'm questioning everything about my family right now. My wife Sarah, 28F, says I should share this somewhere because keeping it bottled up isn't helping anyone. I'm the second of 4 kids. My older brother David, 32M, is what you'd call the golden child. Then there's me, followed by my sister Rachel, 26F, and the baby Emma, 24F. For as long as I can remember, things worked differently for me than for my siblings. Let me start with college. David went to a private university that cost about $55,000 per year. My parents paid every penny of his tuition, room, and board for 4 years. That's roughly $220,000 right there. When he graduated, they also bought him a brand new Honda Accord as a graduation gift, which was another $25,000. Rachel went to the same expensive private school. Same deal, parents covered everything. 4 years, full ride, plus they paid for her sorority fees, spring break trips, and study abroad program in Italy. Another $230,000 easily. She also got a new car when she graduated. Emma is currently finishing up her senior year at yet another expensive private college. Parents have been footing the bill for everything, including her off-campus apartment that costs $1,800 per month. She drives a leased BMW that my parents pay for. We're talking about $240,000 in total support for her education alone. Then there's me. When I turned 18, my parents sat me down and explained that they had looked into my interests and found a 2-year automotive technology program at the local community college. The program cost $8,000 total. They said this was perfect for me because I had always liked working with my hands and fixing things. They paid the tuition, and I lived at home during those 2 years. After I graduated from the automotive program, I got a job at a local mechanic shop. I worked there for 3 years, saving every penny I could. I wanted to go back to school to get a business degree so I could eventually open my own shop. I applied to the state university and got accepted. The tuition was $12,000 per year for in-state students. When I told my parents about my plan to go back to school, they said they were proud of me for being so independent. They didn't offer to help pay for anything. I took out student loans and worked part-time while going to school. It took me 5 years to finish because I could only take a few classes each semester while working. By the time I graduated with my business degree, I had $35,000 in student loan debt. My siblings had zero debt from their education. The car situation was another sore spot. When I needed transportation to get to my job at the mechanic shop, I had to buy my own car. I found a used Toyota Camry with 150,000 miles on it for $4,500. I saved up for months to buy it. Meanwhile, my siblings all got brand new cars as gifts. But the real breaking point came with weddings. David got married 3 years ago. My parents spent $45,000 on his wedding. It was held at a country club with 200 guests. Open bar, 5-course dinner, live band, the works. They paid for everything without him even asking. Rachel got married last year. Her wedding cost $50,000. Different venue, but just as fancy. My parents again covered every expense. They even paid for her honeymoon to Hawaii. Emma isn't engaged yet, but my parents have already started a wedding fund for her. They mention it sometimes, talking about how they want her to have the perfect day when the time comes. Now, about my wedding. Sarah and I got engaged 2 years ago. We were both excited and started planning. I assumed my parents would contribute something, given what they had done for my siblings. When I brought it up, my dad said they were in a tight spot financially and couldn't help. My mom added that they were sure we would figure something out because we were both so practical and good with money. We planned a small wedding with 50 guests at a local park pavilion. Sarah's parents contributed $3,000, which was incredibly generous given their limited income. We spent about $8,000 total on our wedding. Sarah made her own decorations, I borrowed a friend's sound system for music, and we had the reception catered by a local family restaurant. It wasn't fancy, but it was nice and everyone had a good time. The problem started at family dinners after we got married. My siblings would often bring up their weddings and compare notes about vendors, venues, and costs. They would make comments about how cute and quaint our wedding was. David once said our park pavilion was charming in a rustic way. Rachel mentioned that she admired how we kept things simple and didn't go overboard like some people do. These comments always came across as condescending. They weren't being mean exactly, but there was definitely an undertone that suggested our wedding was lesser somehow. What made it worse was that my parents would nod along and sometimes add their own observations about how nice it was that we were so down to earth. The money differences extended beyond just the big expenses. Every Christmas, my siblings exchange expensive gifts. David typically spends $200 to $300 on gifts for each family member. Rachel does the same. Emma, even as a college student, gives generous gifts that I know my parents are funding. Sarah and I stick to a $50 budget per person for Christmas gifts. We make sure they're thoughtful and personal, but we can't compete with the expensive items my siblings give. This creates an awkward dynamic where our gifts look cheap by comparison, even though we put a lot of thought into them. Last month, we were all at dinner at my parents' house. It was a Sunday evening, and we do this maybe twice a month. The conversation turned to home ownership. David was talking about the house he and his wife bought 2 years ago. It's a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in a nice neighborhood. He mentioned that my parents had helped with the down payment. This was news to me. I asked how much they had contributed. David looked uncomfortable but admitted it was $40,000. Rachel chimed in that she had gotten the same amount when she bought her townhouse last year. Emma said she wasn't ready to buy yet but knew the money would be there when she was. I sat there processing this information. My parents had given each of my siblings $40,000 for house down payments. Sarah and I had been renting an apartment for the past 3 years, saving every penny we could for our own down payment. We had managed to save $25,000 so far, but houses in our area typically require $35,000 to $50,000 down. I asked my parents if they planned to help us with a down payment too. My dad said they would love to help but their finances were tight right now. My mom suggested we look at condos or smaller starter homes that might require less money down. The conversation moved on, but I couldn't stop thinking about the numbers. Between college, cars, weddings, and house down payments, my parents had given each of my siblings close to $300,000 in financial support over the years. I had received $8,000 for community college tuition. What really bothered me wasn't just the money. It was the attitude that came with it. My siblings acted like they had earned everything through their own hard work and good choices. They would make comments about people who struggled financially, suggesting that anyone could succeed if they just made smart decisions and worked hard enough. David once lectured me about the importance of investing early for retirement. He was putting away $500 per month in his 401k. What he didn't mention was that he could afford to do this because he had no student loans, no car payments, and parents who had covered his wedding and down payment costs. Rachel frequently posted on social media about her success as a marketing coordinator at a nonprofit. She would write inspiring posts about following your dreams and not letting obstacles stop you. She never acknowledged that her dream job, which paid $35,000 per year, was only possible because she had zero financial obligations thanks to my parents' support. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago. We were having another family dinner, and somehow the conversation turned to financial planning. Emma was asking for advice about budgeting as a new college graduate. David started explaining the importance of building an emergency fund. He said everyone should have 6 months of expenses saved up as a safety net. Rachel agreed and mentioned that she had managed to save $15,000 in her emergency fund. My parents praised both of them for being so responsible with money. I couldn't help myself. I pointed out that it was easy to build an emergency fund when you didn't have student loan payments, car payments, or any other debt. I mentioned that Sarah and I were still paying off my student loans and trying to save for a house at the same time. The room got quiet. Then David said that everyone faces challenges and makes choices. He suggested that maybe I should have chosen a less expensive path for my second degree instead of taking on debt. That comment hit me the wrong way. I had chosen the least expensive option available to me. I went to a state school, lived in the cheapest apartment I could find, and worked while going to school. Meanwhile, he had gone to an expensive private university and never worked a day while he was there. I told him it was easy to make smart financial choices when someone else was paying all your bills. Rachel jumped in and said that our parents had helped all of us equally, just in different ways. She pointed out that I had gotten job training that led directly to employment, which was valuable. This was technically true, but it ignored the massive difference in dollar amounts. My job training cost $8,000. Their educations cost over $200,000 each. The value wasn't even close to equal. Emma tried to play peacemaker and suggested we change the subject. But I was done pretending everything was fair. I asked my parents directly why there was such a huge difference in the support they provided to their children. My dad said they had done their best to help each of us according to our individual needs and interests. My mom added that they had always tried to be fair, even if the amounts weren't exactly the same. I asked what was fair about giving 3 kids nearly $300,000 each while giving the 4th kid $8,000. My dad said they had never looked at it that way and didn't realize the amounts were so different. The conversation ended awkwardly with my parents saying they needed to think about what I had said. My siblings were clearly annoyed with me for making things uncomfortable. Sarah and I left shortly after. I've been thinking about this situation nonstop for the past 3 weeks. Sarah supports me completely and agrees that the treatment has been unfair. She's watched my siblings make condescending comments about our choices while ignoring their own advantages. I'm not sure what to do now. Part of me wants to just accept that this is how my family works and move on. But another part of me feels like I need to address this properly. The financial disparity is one thing, but the attitude that comes with it is what really gets to me. My siblings genuinely seem to believe they earned everything they have through hard work and smart choices. They don't acknowledge the massive head start they received. When they give advice about money management or career success, they completely ignore the role that parental support played in their achievements. I keep wondering if I'm wrong to bring this up. Maybe I should just be grateful for what I did receive and focus on building my own life. But it's hard to ignore such a blatant double standard, especially when it gets thrown in my face every time we have family gatherings. What would you do in this situation? Am I wrong to expect equal treatment from my parents? Should I just let this go and move forward, or is this something that needs to be addressed? Update 1: I wanted to update everyone on what happened after my original post. The response was overwhelming, and reading all your comments helped me realize I wasn't crazy for being upset about this situation. The day after I posted, my mom called and asked if we could have lunch to talk about our conversation at dinner. I agreed, thinking maybe she was ready to acknowledge the unfairness of how they had treated me. We met at a quiet restaurant, and she started by saying she had been thinking about what I said. She told me that she and my dad never intended to treat any of their children unfairly. She explained that they had made decisions based on what each child needed at the time, not on some grand plan to favor certain kids. I listened to her explanation, but it didn't make much sense. She said David needed extensive support because he was the first child and they wanted to set him up for success. Rachel needed help because she was pursuing a career in nonprofit work, which doesn't pay well. Emma needed support because she was the youngest and they had more resources available by the time she went to college. When I asked where that left me, she said I had always been so independent and capable that they figured I would do fine on my own. She actually said they were proud of how well I had managed without much help. This explanation made me more frustrated than before. They were essentially saying they gave less support to me because I was responsible enough to handle things myself, while giving more support to my siblings because they needed it. It was like being punished for being self-sufficient. I told her that the dollar amounts didn't lie. Even if their intentions were good, the result was that my siblings had received nearly 40 times more financial support than I had. She seemed surprised when I put it that way and asked how I had calculated that number. I had done the math after our family dinner. David received approximately $285,000 in support, college tuition, room and board, car, wedding, house down payment. Rachel received about $320,000, same categories as David, plus her study abroad program and sorority expenses. Emma was on track to receive around $290,000 by the time she graduated and got married. My total support was $8,000 for community college tuition. When I showed my mom these numbers, she got quiet. She said she had never added everything up before and didn't realize the difference was so large. She asked if I was sure about the amounts, and I walked through each expense category with her. She admitted the numbers were probably accurate but said focusing on dollar amounts wasn't the right way to look at family relationships. She suggested that love and support couldn't be measured in money. I agreed that love couldn't be measured in money, but financial support certainly could be. I pointed out that my siblings had benefited enormously from the financial assistance, allowing them to start their adult lives without debt and with significant advantages. The conversation ended with my mom saying she needed to talk to my dad about the situation. She asked me not to discuss this with my siblings until she and my dad had a chance to process everything. 2 days later, my dad called. He was much more direct than my mom had been. He said he understood I was upset about the financial differences, but he wanted me to consider the bigger picture. He explained that supporting children was about more than just spending equal amounts of money. He said they had tried to give each child what they needed to succeed, which meant different things for different people. I asked him to explain how Emma needed a BMW while I needed a 15-year-old Toyota. He couldn't give me a good answer to that one. He also brought up my community college program, saying it had been a smart investment that led directly to a good job. He pointed out that many four-year college graduates struggle to find employment in their field, while I had been working steadily since I finished my training. While this was true, it completely missed the point. I had used my community college training as a stepping stone to get a business degree, which I had to pay for myself. Meanwhile, my siblings had been able to pursue whatever they wanted without worrying about the cost. My dad concluded the conversation by saying he hoped I could move past this and focus on the positive aspects of our family relationships. He said dwelling on money would only create resentment and hurt everyone involved. After talking to both my parents, I realized they weren't going to acknowledge the unfairness of the situation. They had convinced themselves that their actions were justified based on each child's individual needs and circumstances. This might have been the end of it, but then something happened that changed everything. Last weekend, Sarah and I were at Emma's apartment helping her move some furniture. Emma had been quiet around me since the family dinner, and I could tell she was uncomfortable about the whole situation. While we were taking a break, she asked if she could talk to me privately. We went out to the balcony, and she told me something that I'm still processing. She said that 2 years ago, when I was finishing my business degree, she had overheard a conversation between my parents and David. They were discussing whether to offer me help with my student loans since I was struggling to make the payments while also saving for a wedding. According to Emma, David had advised against it. He told my parents that helping me would set a bad precedent and that I needed to learn to handle my own financial responsibilities. He said I had chosen to take on debt by going back to school, so I should deal with the consequences. Emma said my parents seemed to be leaning toward helping me until David made those comments. After that conversation, they decided not to offer any assistance. This information hit me like a ton of bricks. It meant that my parents had actually considered helping me, but my own brother had talked them out of it. David had actively worked to prevent me from receiving the same support he had gotten throughout his life. Emma also told me that David had made similar comments when my parents were discussing wedding contributions. He had suggested that since Sarah and I were good at managing money, we probably preferred to keep our wedding small and simple anyway. I asked Emma why she was telling me this now. She said she had been feeling guilty about it for 2 years, especially after hearing the argument at dinner a few weeks ago. She realized that David's interference had probably cost me thousands of dollars in interest on my student loans and had forced Sarah and me to have a much smaller wedding than we might have wanted. This revelation changed everything for me. It wasn't just about my parents treating their children differently anymore. It was about my own brother actively sabotaging my chances of receiving equal treatment. I spent the weekend trying to decide what to do with this information. Sarah thought I should confront David directly, but I wanted to think it through first. On Monday, I called my parents and asked if we could have another conversation. I told them what Emma had shared with me and asked if it was true. My mom confirmed that they had discussed helping me with my student loans but had decided against it. When I asked why, she said they thought it would be better for me to handle my own debt since I had chosen to take on the financial obligation. I asked if David had been part of that decision-making process. My dad admitted that they had asked David for his opinion since he was older and had experience with financial planning. This admission made me realize that my siblings weren't just passive beneficiaries of my parents' favoritism. At least David was actively participating in decisions that affected my financial well-being, and he was consistently arguing against providing me with support. I told my parents that having one child advise against helping another child created a serious conflict of interest. David had received massive amounts of financial support throughout his life, yet he was advising my parents not to help me when I needed assistance. My parents seemed to understand this point but said they had never thought about it that way before. My mom said they had valued David's input because he was successful and responsible with money. I pointed out that David's success was built on the foundation of hundreds of thousands of dollars in parental support. His advice about financial responsibility was hypocritical given his own history of receiving help. The conversation ended with my parents saying they needed to reconsider how they made decisions about supporting their children. They apologized for not recognizing the conflict of interest and asking David to weigh in on my situation. But the damage was already done. I now knew that my brother had actively worked against me receiving fair treatment from my parents. The financial disparity wasn't just the result of different approaches to different children, it was the result of deliberate interference from my sibling. I'm not sure what my next steps will be, but I know I can't pretend everything is normal at family gatherings anymore. The dynamic has been permanently changed by these revelations. Update 2: The situation with my family has gotten much more complicated since my last update. After learning about David's interference, I decided I needed to have a direct conversation with him about it. I called David and asked if he wanted to grab coffee to discuss some family stuff. He agreed, probably thinking I was going to apologize for making things awkward at the family dinner. We met at a coffee shop near his office, and I got straight to the point. I told him that Emma had shared information about his conversations with our parents regarding financial support for me. I asked him to explain his reasoning for advising against helping me. David's reaction surprised me. Instead of denying it or seeming embarrassed, he doubled down on his position. He said he stood by the advice he had given our parents and thought it was the right thing to do. He explained that he believed I needed to learn financial independence and that receiving help would prevent me from developing proper money management skills. He said our parents had already helped me by paying for my community college, and additional support would create dependency. I asked him how that logic applied to him, given that he had received help throughout his 20s. He said his situation was different because he had used the support to build a strong foundation for long-term success. This conversation made it clear that David genuinely believed his advice had been in my best interest, even though it had cost me thousands of dollars and created years of financial stress. I told him that his advice had prevented me from receiving equal treatment from our parents. He disagreed and said equal treatment didn't mean identical treatment, it meant each child getting what they needed. We went back and forth on this for a while, but it became obvious that we weren't going to see eye to eye. David was convinced that he had helped me by encouraging our parents to let me handle my own finances. I was convinced that he had sabotaged my chances of receiving fair support. The conversation ended badly, with David saying I was being ungrateful and focusing too much on money instead of appreciating the non-financial support our family provided. I told him it was easy to dismiss money when you had never had to worry about it. After my confrontation with David, word got back to Rachel pretty quickly. She called me a few days later and said she thought I was being unfair to David and our parents. Rachel's perspective was that our parents had done their best to help all of us, and that comparing dollar amounts was petty and divisive. She said David had given good advice based on his experience and knowledge about finances. I tried to explain to Rachel that David's experience was completely different from mine because he had never faced real financial challenges. She said that was exactly why his advice was valuable. He understood how to build wealth and financial stability. This conversation made me realize that Rachel was just as out of touch as David about the advantages they had received. She genuinely believed that their success was primarily due to their own hard work and smart decisions, with parental support playing only a minor role. Things got worse when Rachel apparently shared our conversation with our parents. My mom called me that evening and said she was disappointed that I had confronted David without talking to them first. She said they were all concerned about me and worried that I was letting resentment poison my relationships with the people who loved me most. She suggested that maybe Sarah and I should consider talking to someone professional about working through these issues. This suggestion made me realize that my family was starting to frame my legitimate concerns as a personal problem that I needed to fix, rather than acknowledging the actual unfairness of the situation. I told my mom that I wasn't interested in fixing my attitude about being treated unfairly. I was interested in seeing acknowledgement that the treatment had actually been unfair. My mom said she and my dad were willing to make things right by helping us financially now. She offered to give us money toward a house down payment or to help pay off my remaining student loans. At first, this seemed like progress. But then she added that she hoped this gesture would allow us to move past the negative feelings and get back to normal family relationships. This condition made the offer feel more like a bribe than genuine recognition of wrongdoing. She was essentially offering to pay me to stop complaining about the unfair treatment. I told her I needed to think about the offer and discuss it with Sarah. When I explained the conversation to Sarah, she had the same reaction I did. The offer felt manipulative rather than genuinely apologetic. Sarah pointed out that accepting money with strings attached would probably make things worse in the long run. If I took their offer and then continued to have problems with the family dynamic, they would point to their financial gesture as proof that they had done right by me. We decided not to accept the offer, at least not under those conditions. I called my mom back and told her that while I appreciated the gesture, I wasn't comfortable accepting money that was contingent on me dropping my concerns about the family's treatment of me. My mom seemed hurt and said she didn't understand what more I wanted from them. I told her I wanted acknowledgement that the treatment had been unfair, not just a financial payment to make the problem go away. This led to another difficult conversation where my mom insisted that they had never intentionally treated me unfairly. She said all parents make mistakes, but she and my dad had always acted with good intentions. I acknowledged that their intentions might have been good, but pointed out that the impact of their actions was what mattered to me and Sarah. Good intentions didn't erase the financial stress we had experienced or the advantages my siblings had received. The conversation ended with my mom saying she was disappointed that their offer hadn't been enough to repair our relationship. She said she hoped I would reconsider and think about what was really important in life. After rejecting my parents' conditional offer, things became very tense at family gatherings. The next family dinner was uncomfortable, with everyone walking on eggshells around the topic of money or fairness. David and Rachel were clearly frustrated with me for not accepting our parents' peace offering. They made several comments about how some people were never satisfied and always found something to complain about. Emma, on the other hand, seemed to understand my position better. After dinner, she pulled me aside and said she thought I was right to reject the conditional offer. She said our parents were trying to buy their way out of accountability rather than actually addressing the problem. Emma also shared more information about conversations she had overheard over the years. Apparently, there had been multiple instances where David and Rachel had advised against helping me with various expenses and opportunities. She told me about a time 2 years earlier when I had mentioned wanting to take some continuing education courses to improve my business skills. My parents had briefly considered paying for the courses, but David had suggested that I should invest my own money if I thought the education was worthwhile. Emma said there had been similar conversations about helping me buy a more reliable car when my old Toyota was having problems, and about contributing to Sarah's and my honeymoon expenses. In each case, David and Rachel had advised against providing assistance, arguing that I should handle these expenses myself to build character and financial responsibility. Learning about these additional instances of interference made me realize that the problem was much bigger than I had originally thought. My siblings hadn't just been passive beneficiaries of favorable treatment, they had been active participants in ensuring that I received minimal support. This pattern of behavior suggested that they were either completely unaware of their own advantages or were intentionally trying to maintain their favored status by preventing me from receiving equal treatment. Either way, it became clear that the family dynamic was more toxic than I had realized, and that simply having conversations about fairness wasn't going to fix the underlying problems. Update 3: I'm writing this final update because several people have asked what happened after my last post, and I think I owe it to everyone who offered advice and support to close out this story. The situation with my family reached a breaking point about a month ago, and I've made some difficult decisions about how to handle the relationships going forward. The final straw came during Emma's graduation dinner. My parents had organized a celebration at an upscale restaurant to commemorate Emma finishing her degree. The whole family was there, including extended relatives who I hadn't seen in a while. During dinner, my Uncle Mark asked Emma about her plans after graduation. She mentioned that she was taking some time to travel through Europe for 6 weeks before starting her job search. My Aunt Susan asked how she was funding such an expensive trip, and Emma casually mentioned that it was a graduation gift from my parents. I later found out that this European trip was costing my parents about $12,000, including flights, hotels, and spending money. Hearing this news at dinner brought back all the frustration I had been trying to manage. Here was yet another expensive gift for one of my siblings, while Sarah and I continued to pay off my student loans and save penny by penny for our house down payment. What made it worse was that Emma seemed completely oblivious to how privileged she was to receive such an expensive graduation gift. She talked about the trip as if it was something she had earned through her hard work in college, rather than something that was being handed to her. After dinner, I asked my parents if I could speak with them privately. I told them I was having a hard time watching them continue to give expensive gifts to my siblings while maintaining that they couldn't afford to help me with basic expenses like student loan payments. My dad's response was that Emma's trip was a one-time graduation gift, not ongoing financial support. He said it was different from helping with loans or other regular expenses. I pointed out that David had received similar expensive gifts throughout his 20s, and Rachel had gotten comparable treatment. The graduation trip was just the latest in a long pattern of generous support for everyone except me. My mom said they were proud of Emma for finishing college and wanted to celebrate her achievement. She suggested that I was being negative and taking away from Emma's special moment by bringing up these concerns. This response made me realize that nothing was going to change. My parents were going to continue treating my siblings generously while making excuses for not providing me with equal support. They were also going to continue framing my objections as character flaws rather than legitimate concerns about fairness. I told my parents that I needed to take a step back from family gatherings and focus on my own life with Sarah. I said I would still maintain relationships with individual family members, but I couldn't keep participating in group events where I was constantly reminded of the unequal treatment. My mom immediately became upset and said I was being dramatic and hurting the whole family with my attitude. She said families weren't supposed to keep score about money and gifts. My dad was more direct. He said I was acting like a child and needed to grow up and move on. He said successful people don't spend time complaining about what they didn't get, they focus on building their own success. This conversation confirmed that my parents were never going to acknowledge the unfairness of their treatment or take responsibility for the impact of their decisions. They were committed to maintaining the narrative that they had treated all their children fairly and that any problems were the result of my bad attitude. After that dinner, I decided to limit my contact with my parents and David and Rachel. I still talk to Emma regularly because she has been understanding and supportive throughout this whole situation. Emma told me that after I left the graduation dinner early, David and Rachel spent the rest of the evening complaining about my behavior. They apparently said I was jealous and immature, and suggested that my parents should stop trying to accommodate my complaints. David reportedly said that I had always been difficult and that the family would be better off if I just stayed away from gatherings until I could learn to be more positive. Hearing this second-hand confirmation of how my siblings really viewed me was painful but also liberating. It made clear that they had never taken my concerns seriously and had no interest in examining their own role in the family dynamics. Since making the decision to step back from most family contact, my life has become much calmer and less stressful. Sarah and I don't have to dread family gatherings anymore, and I don't have to listen to my siblings make condescending comments about financial responsibility while benefiting from massive parental support. We've been able to focus on our own goals without constantly being reminded of what we're missing out on. We're still working toward buying a house, and we should have enough saved for a down payment within the next year. My relationship with Emma has actually gotten stronger since I've distanced myself from the rest of the family. She comes over for dinner regularly, and we've been able to have honest conversations about the family dynamics without worrying about other people's reactions. Emma has also started declining some of the financial support my parents offer her, saying she wants to become more independent. She told me that watching this whole situation unfold has made her more aware of the advantages she's received and more interested in building her own success. My parents have reached out a few times to try to convince me to come back to family events. They've made it clear that they think I'm overreacting and damaging family relationships over money issues. They've also mentioned that my absence is making things awkward for everyone else, and they've asked what it would take to get me to participate in family gatherings again. I've told them that I would consider rebuilding our relationship if they were willing to acknowledge the unequal treatment and take responsibility for the impact of their decisions. So far, they haven't been willing to do this. David and Rachel haven't reached out to me at all, which tells me everything I need to know about their priorities and their understanding of the situation. Looking back on everything that's happened, I don't regret standing up for myself and demanding fair treatment. The financial disparity was real and significant, and it had concrete impacts on my life and opportunities. More importantly, the attitude and behavior patterns that created the financial disparity were symptoms of deeper problems in how my family operated. My siblings' lack of self-awareness about their advantages and their active role in preventing me from receiving equal support revealed character issues that went beyond money. I'm not interested in maintaining relationships with people who think it's acceptable to receive hundreds of thousands of dollars in support while advising against providing basic assistance to their brother. I'm also not interested in pretending that everything is fine with parents who refuse to acknowledge obvious unfairness in how they treated their children. Sarah and I are building our own life based on our own values and priorities. We're surrounded by friends who treat us with respect and fairness, and we have Emma's genuine support within the family. I know some people might think I should have just accepted the situation and maintained family relationships despite the problems. But I've learned that sometimes the healthiest choice is to step away from relationships that consistently make you feel bad about yourself, even when those relationships are with family members. For anyone dealing with similar family dynamics, I'd say trust your instincts about fairness and don't let people convince you that your legitimate concerns are character flaws. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who are least willing to treat you with basic respect and consideration. My life is better now, even though it's more complicated in some ways. I'd rather have a smaller circle of people who actually value me than a larger group that takes me for granted and dismisses my concerns. That's where things stand now, and I'm comfortable with the decisions I've made. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My neighbor's husband kept flirting with me. When we confronted him, his wife called us liars. A year later, he's in prison and you won't believe why I, Emma, 28F, never imagined I'd be sharing the story, but I need advice on a situation that's slowly unraveling my life. My husband Richard, 30M, and I have been married for 3 years now, together for 8. We met in college. I was a sophomore studying psychology, and he was a senior majoring in engineering. It wasn't love at first sight or anything movie-worthy. We were lab partners in a general education course, and over the semester, our friendship grew into something more. Richard has always been my rock. He's patient, kind, and has this dry sense of humor that never fails to make me laugh. We dated for 5 years before getting married, taking our time to make sure we were truly ready for that commitment. Our wedding was small but perfect, just close family and friends in Richard's parents' backyard. We honeymooned in Hawaii, a trip we had saved up for during our entire engagement. After the wedding, we lived in a small apartment in the city. Richard worked as a mechanical engineer at a local firm, while I finished my master's degree in counseling. We were happy but cramped. We'd often joke about needing to schedule time in the bathroom because it was so tiny. Still, it was ours, and we made it work. Last year, an opportunity came up that we couldn't pass up. Richard's company offered him a promotion, but it required relocating to a suburban area about an hour away from the city. The pay increase was substantial, and the cost of living was lower. After many late-night discussions and pros/con lists, Richard's engineering mind at work, we decided to take the plunge. We found a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood called Maple Grove. It was more than we ever dreamed we could afford, a 2-story home with a big backyard and a garage large enough for Richard to tinker with his beloved vintage Mustang. The previous owners had maintained a beautiful garden, which excited me as I'd always wanted to try my hand at gardening but never had the space in our apartment. Moving day was chaotic but fun. Richard's college buddies came to help, and we ended the day with pizza and beer on our new patio furniture. As we sat there, watching the sunset over our new neighborhood, I remember feeling so content. This was the beginning of our next chapter. The next day, as we were unpacking, our next-door neighbors came over to introduce themselves. George, 35M, and Sharon, 33F. Miller seemed nice enough. They brought over a homemade apple pie and offered to show us around the neighborhood. They had 2 kids, Mary, 7F, and Max, 5M, who were shy at first but quickly warmed up to us when they discovered Richard could do magic tricks. George worked in finance and Sharon was a part-time yoga instructor. They'd lived in Maple Grove for nearly a decade and knew everyone. They even offered to host a small get-together to introduce us to other neighbors. We were touched by their kindness and accepted gratefully. The get-together was a success. We met several other couples around our age and felt welcomed into the community. Mark, 40M, and Nancy, 38F, from across the street were particularly friendly. Mark was a high school teacher, and Nancy ran a small bakery in town. They didn't have kids but doted on their 2 golden retrievers. For the first few months, everything was perfect. Richard settled into his new role at work, often coming home excited about the projects he was working on. I found a job at a local counseling center, helping teenagers with anxiety and depression. On weekends, we'd explore our new town or work on house projects together. We became closer with the Millers. Our dogs, our Corgi, Bentley, and their Labrador, Cooper, would play in the shared backyard. Richard and George bonded over their shared love for vintage cars. George had a classic Chevrolet that he was restoring, and the two would spend hours discussing engines and paint jobs. Sharon and I discovered we both enjoyed gardening. She taught me how to care for the plants the previous owners had left behind and helped me start my own vegetable patch. We'd often spend Saturday mornings working in our gardens, chatting over the fence that separated our yards. However, things started to change about 6 months ago. I began noticing George acting differently around me. It was subtle at first, lingering glances, standing a bit too close when we talked, finding excuses to come over when Richard wasn't around. I brushed it off initially, thinking maybe I was reading too much into things. After all, I'm a counselor, I'm trained to notice behavioral changes, and sometimes I worry I overanalyze. But as time went on, George's behavior became more obvious. He started sending me text messages, asking how my day was going or if I needed any help around the house. Once, when Richard was out of town for a work conference, George showed up at our door with a bottle of wine, claiming Sharon was out with friends and he thought I might like some company. I politely declined, feeling uncomfortable with the situation. I didn't tell Richard about these incidents at first. I didn't want to create tension with our neighbors, especially when Sharon had been so kind to me. Plus, Richard and George had become good friends, often working on their cars together or watching sports games. I told myself I was probably overreacting and tried to avoid being alone with George. The breaking point came during our neighborhood's annual summer festival last month. It's a big event in Maple Grove. The whole community comes together for a day of food, games, and a fireworks display at night. Richard had to work late that day, his team was up against a big deadline, so I went alone, promising to save him some of Mark and Nancy's famous barbecue ribs. George approached me almost immediately, offering me a drink and sticking by my side for most of the evening. As the night wore on and more alcohol flowed, George became bolder. He put his arm around my waist while we were talking to other neighbors, and at one point, he leaned in and whispered that I looked beautiful. I was shocked and pulled away, making an excuse about needing to check on something at home. I left the festival early, my mind reeling. When I got home, I told Richard everything, about the text messages, the wine incident, and what had happened at the festival. He was furious and wanted to confront George right away, but I convinced him to wait until we had cooled down and could approach the situation rationally. The next day, Richard and I decided to talk to George and Sharon together. We invited them over, thinking it would be best to address the issue openly and honestly. But what happened next left us both stunned. When we explained the situation to Sharon, instead of being upset with George, she laughed it off. She said George was just a friendly guy and that I must have misinterpreted his actions. George denied everything, claiming I was the one who had been flirting with him. He even went so far as to suggest that maybe I was unhappy in my marriage and projecting my feelings onto him. Richard defended me vehemently, but George and Sharon seemed to have a united front. They accused us of trying to create drama in the neighborhood and threatened to tell everyone that we were causing problems. The conversation ended with them storming out of our house, leaving Richard and me in disbelief. Now, we're at a loss. Our once friendly neighborhood feels hostile. We've heard whispers that George and Sharon have been spreading rumors about us to other neighbors. Some people have stopped talking to us altogether. Richard suggested we consider moving, but we love our house and don't feel we should have to leave because of someone else's inappropriate behavior. I feel violated and angry, not just at George's actions, but at Sharon's dismissal of my concerns and their joint attempt to turn the situation around on us. Richard is supportive, but I can tell he's frustrated and unsure of what to do next. This house was supposed to be the start of our future together, and now it feels tainted. We're considering reaching out to other neighbors to explain our side of the story, but we're worried about escalating the situation. Should we stand our ground or cut our losses and move? How do we navigate this complex situation without letting it tear apart our life in this neighborhood we once loved? Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and I want to thank everyone for their advice and support. Your words have been a source of strength for Richard and me as we've navigated this difficult situation. After much discussion, Richard and I decided to stand our ground. We realized that moving would feel like admitting guilt, and we hadn't done anything wrong. Instead, we chose to be proactive about addressing the situation in our neighborhood. We started by reaching out to Mark and Nancy, the couple from across the street. We had always gotten along well with them, often sharing meals or having game nights together. We invited them over for dinner, promising to explain why we'd been so distant lately. The evening of the dinner, I was a bundle of nerves. I spent hours cleaning the house and preparing the meal, a lasagna recipe passed down from my grandmother. Richard tried to calm me down, reminding me that Mark and Nancy were our friends and would listen with an open mind. When Mark and Nancy arrived, we made small talk over appetizers. But as we sat down to dinner, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I burst into tears, the stress of the past few weeks finally overwhelming me. Through my sobs, I explained everything that had happened with George and Sharon. To our immense relief, Mark and Nancy were incredibly supportive. They revealed that they had noticed George's behavior towards other women in the neighborhood and had always found it a bit off-putting. Nancy shared that George had made her uncomfortable at a neighborhood barbecue last year, standing too close and making suggestive comments. She hadn't said anything at the time, not wanting to create drama. Mark and Nancy encouraged us to speak to other neighbors. They assured us that not everyone was buying into George and Sharon's version of events. In fact, they suggested that our silence might be allowing George and Sharon's rumors to gain traction. Emboldened by their support, we decided to host a neighborhood potluck. We invited everyone on our street, including George and Sharon. Our plan was to address the elephant in the room in a public setting, hoping that the presence of others would encourage honesty and prevent further manipulation. The week leading up to the potluck was tense. We received a mix of responses to our invitation. Some neighbors accepted enthusiastically, while others made excuses about prior commitments. George and Sharon didn't respond at all, leaving us unsure if they would show up. The day of the potluck arrived. Richard and I spent the morning preparing our backyard, setting up tables and chairs, stringing up lights. I made my mom's famous potato salad and Richard fired up the grill for burgers and hot dogs. To our surprise, almost everyone showed up, even George and Sharon. The atmosphere was tense at first, with people clearly unsure of how to act around us. Richard and I did our best to be warm and welcoming, which seemed to put most of our neighbors at ease. About halfway through the evening, I stood up and addressed everyone. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. I calmly explained what had been happening with George, how Sharon had dismissed my concerns, and how they had then spread rumors about us. I made it clear that we valued our place in the community and wanted to clear the air. The reaction was mixed. Some neighbors looked uncomfortable, while others nodded in understanding. George and Sharon sat stone-faced throughout my speech. When I finished, I invited anyone with questions or concerns to speak up. What happened next was unexpected. Rachel, 45F, who lived 2 houses down from us, stood up. With a shaky voice, she said that George had made similar advances towards her last year, but she had been too embarrassed to say anything. Her husband, Dave, 47M, looked shocked. Apparently, she hadn't told him either. This revelation seemed to open the floodgates. 2 other women came forward with similar stories about George's inappropriate behavior. Sharon sat there, her face growing redder by the minute. George tried to defend himself, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, but it was clear that no one was buying it anymore. The evening ended with George and Sharon leaving early, and the rest of the neighbors staying to talk. Many apologized to us for believing the rumors, and there was a general sense of relief that the truth had finally come out. In the days that followed, we received numerous messages of support from our neighbors. George and Sharon have been noticeably absent from neighborhood activities, and we've heard through the grapevine that they're considering moving. While the situation isn't entirely resolved, Richard and I feel much better. We're glad we decided to face the problem head-on instead of running away from it. Our relationships with our other neighbors have actually grown stronger through this ordeal. We're still processing everything that's happened, but we're cautiously optimistic about the future. The neighborhood feels different now. There's a sense of unity that wasn't there before. People are making more of an effort to check in on each other and spend time together. Richard and I have started hosting a weekly game night, alternating houses with Mark and Nancy. It's become a neighborhood event, with different people joining each week. Last Friday, we had so many people that we had to set up tables in the backyard. As for George and Sharon, we haven't seen much of them. They keep to themselves now, only leaving their house when necessary. Part of me feels bad for them, especially their kids who don't understand why they can't play with the other neighborhood children anymore. But then I remind myself of all the pain they caused and the trust they broke. We're taking it one day at a time, focusing on rebuilding our life here and strengthening our relationships with our neighbors. It's not always easy, but we're getting there. We'll keep you updated if anything else significant occurs. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and the situation has taken some unexpected turns. I apologize for the delay in posting. Things have been hectic, to say the least. Shortly after our neighborhood potluck, George and Sharon put their house up for sale. They didn't speak to anyone about it, just quietly listed the property. Most of the neighbors were relieved, thinking this would be the end of the drama. Richard and I felt a mix of emotions, relief that we wouldn't have to deal with them anymore, but also frustration that they were leaving without ever really acknowledging the harm they'd caused. Life in the neighborhood started to return to normal. Our weekly game nights continued to be a hit, and we even started a book club that met once a month. It felt like we were finally settling into the community life we had dreamed of when we first moved here. But about 3 weeks ago, as Richard and I were having breakfast on a quiet Sunday morning, we heard a commotion outside. We looked out to see police cars parked in front of George and Sharon's house. Curious and concerned, we went outside, joining other neighbors who had gathered to watch. To our shock, we saw George being led out of the house in handcuffs. Sharon followed, crying and yelling at the officers. Their kids were nowhere to be seen, which was a small mercy. None of us knew what was happening, but rumors started flying immediately. It wasn't until the next day that we learned the truth, and it was far worse than anyone could have imagined. George had been arrested on charges of embezzlement from his company. Apparently, he'd been stealing money for years to fund a lavish lifestyle that he and Sharon couldn't actually afford. This revelation put everything into a new perspective. George's aggressive flirting, Sharon's dismissal of other women's concerns, it all seemed like a smokescreen now, a way to distract from their real issues. The fallout was intense. Sharon and their kids moved out of the house within a week, presumably to stay with family. The house has been seized as part of the investigation into George's crimes. Our once quiet street has been buzzing with activity. Police, lawyers, and even local news vans have been a common sight. Richard and I have been trying to process this information. On one hand, we feel vindicated. George's true character has been revealed, and it's clear that his inappropriate behavior towards me and other women was just the tip of the iceberg. On the other hand, we feel a deep sadness for George and Sharon's children, who are innocent victims in all of this. The neighborhood has rallied together in the wake of this scandal. We've had several community meetings to discuss how we can support each other and move forward. There's been talk of setting up a neighborhood watch program and organizing more regular community events to strengthen our bonds. Personally, this whole experience has been a roller coaster. Richard and I are relieved that George is gone, but we're also dealing with a sense of guilt. Could we have somehow seen the bigger picture? Could we have done something to prevent this? Rationally, we know it's not our fault, but it's hard not to second-guess ourselves. We're focusing on healing now, both as a couple and as part of our community. We're grateful for the support of our neighbors and are committed to helping rebuild the trust that was broken. As for George and Sharon, we've heard that George is awaiting trial and Sharon has filed for divorce. It's a sad end to what once seemed like a perfect family life. We'll keep you updated if there are any more developments, but for now, we're just taking it one day at a time and trying to find our new normal in the aftermath of all this chaos. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some final thoughts on this whole situation. George's trial concluded last month. He was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Sharon testified against him, revealing that she had been unaware of the embezzlement. She claimed that George had gaslighted her for years, making her doubt her own perceptions, including the concerns raised by me and other women in the neighborhood. While it doesn't excuse her actions, it did help us understand her perspective a bit better. Sharon and the kids moved away shortly after the trial. Before leaving, she came to our house to apologize. It was a difficult conversation, filled with tears and regrets. She admitted that she had ignored the signs of George's inappropriate behavior because she was desperately trying to keep her family together. We didn't become best friends or anything, but we did reach a place of understanding. Our neighborhood has undergone a significant transformation. The experience has brought us all closer together. We now have monthly community meetings where we discuss everything from local issues to planning social events. We've started several initiatives, including a neighborhood watch program and a community garden. The community garden has been a particularly healing project. We converted an unused lot at the end of our street into a beautiful space filled with vegetables, flowers, and even a small orchard. It's become a place where neighbors gather to work together, share stories, and heal from the past year's events. I often find myself there, tending to the tomatoes or chatting with Nancy about her latest baking adventures. Richard and I have grown stronger through this ordeal. We've learned the importance of open communication and standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. We've also learned not to take our relationships, with each other and with our community, for granted. Our careers have taken some interesting turns too. Richard's company recognized his leadership during the difficult times in our neighborhood and promoted him to a management position. As for me, my experiences inspired me to shift my counseling focus. I now specialize in helping people who have been victims of manipulation and gaslighting. It's challenging work, but incredibly rewarding. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much has changed in just over a year. What started as a simple neighborly dispute unveiled a web of lies, crime, and broken trust. It's been a harsh reminder that you never really know what's going on behind closed doors. We're moving forward now, focusing on the positive changes that have come out of this difficult time. Our neighborhood feels more united than ever, and we're committed to maintaining that sense of community. Last weekend, we had our first annual Maple Grove Festival, a day of food, games, and music that ended with a beautiful lantern release. As I watched the lanterns float into the night sky, each carrying a neighbor's hope or wish for the future, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. As for us, Richard and I are doing well. We've decided to renew our wedding vows next month, a celebration of our love and resilience in the face of adversity. Many of our neighbors will be there to celebrate with us. We're holding the ceremony in our backyard, the same place where this whole journey began. We've also started talking about starting a family. The events of the past year made us realize life is short and unpredictable. We want to fill our home with love and laughter, to create the family we've always dreamed of. This will be my final update on this situation. Thank you all for your support and advice throughout this journey. It's been a tough road, but we've come out stronger on the other side. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that with honesty, perseverance, and the support of a strong community, you can overcome almost anything. To anyone out there facing a similar situation, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Your voice matters, and you deserve to feel safe and respected in your own home and community. And remember, sometimes the darkest times can lead to the brightest futures. They certainly did for us.